Hello, welcome to Chapter 12a of the present participles. You'll notice that in the Chapter 12 is broken into three parts, Chapter 12a, Chapter 12b, and 12c. We'll be working on participles in three parts. The good news is that as you are working on participles in Chapter 12, you'll notice that there are no new vocabulary lists to learn, so that means for the next few lessons you will not have to be memorizing new vocabulary words. You will be able to devote all your time to focusing on participles. With that in mind, let's roll up our sleeves and dive in and take a look at what we have here for participles. At one time, Vera Verb and AD Detective were romantically linked with one another, and they had a son together, and his name was Participle. And reason why we bring AD Detective and Vera Verb together to talk about participles or participle is because a participle is really a verbal adjective. That is, a participle, as you're going to learn in this video, can either modify a noun or a verb. Let me give you some examples here from English. Example 1, the hiking enthusiast fell. In this sentence, the word hiking that is underlined on your screen is acting as an adjective. It's actually telling us what kind of an enthusiast the person was. They were a hiking enthusiast. In example 2, you see we have in this sentence, while hiking up the mountain, I fell. In this sentence, we find that the word hiking now is not working as an adjective, it's working as a verb. It tells you what I was doing when I fell. Most participles in English end in ing. So for instance, we saw the swimming instructor, or after eating, we took a nap. In the first sentence, the swimming instructor, the participle swimming is acting like an adjective. It's telling us what kind of an instructor. And in the second sentence, it's telling us the circumstances under which we took a nap. It's after eating. And that's an important thing that you're going to need to keep in mind while you're working with participles, that a participle can function in one of two ways. It can function either as an adjective or it can function as a verb. So, for instance, again, on your screen there in the top left-hand corner, the canoeing instructor, in this case the word canoeing is acting like an adjective that tells us what kind of an instructor that this person is. In the sentence on the top right-hand corner of your screen, canoeing at the beach tells us what the individual is doing. They were canoeing. And so if you look at the bottom of the screen, our complete sentence is, yesterday I saw the canoeing instructor canoeing at the beach. The same word used twice in the same sentence, yet it both times functions in a different way, once as an adjective and then as a verb. Here's another example. Fishing expert, in the one hand, can act as an adjective, okay, or fishing with a fly, it acts as a verb. And so our sentence here is, we saw the fishing expert fishing with a fly. So as we begin getting into participles, the first thing to keep in mind is that participles can have verbal qualities. That is, you're going to see they have both a tense and a voice, but here's one thing you don't have to worry about. They do not have a mood. So far you've only been dealing with the indicative mood, but one thing you're going to be able to discover is that there are no moods in the participle. It also has adjectival qualities, and that is just like all your other adjectives, it's going to have a gender, a number, and a case. And so what you're going to notice in participles is that many of the skills that you learned in association with nouns and adjectives, the gender, number, and case, are going to come into play now with the verbs, in this case the tense and the voice. So then, how do we form a participle? Well, even though participles have aspects that you're used to seeing with a noun, the good news is that participles are still only formed from verb stems. So all the verbs that you have learned thus far in this class are going to be able to become participles. Nouns do not become participles, only verbs. So keep in mind that we are dealing primarily here with verbs. And so a participle will be formed by its verb stem and then the present participle endings that we're going to introduce you to. And here on the screen, you will note there are the participle endings for the present active participle in the singular. Notice that across the top of the screen, we have our masculine, our feminine, and our neuter. And then down on the left-hand side of the screen, we have all of our cases, the nominative, the genitive, the dative, and the accusative. The only case that's missing is the vocative. There are no vocative participles. So already you can see our gender and our number and our case, the things that you're already used to seeing when we deal with nouns. But notice that the stem that you are dealing with in this paradigm is not a noun. It's the good old lu stem that has been helping us learn our verbs thus far. So here again, as I said, is the coming together of verb and noun together. And notice across the top where we have the masculine, feminine, and the neuter, we have what we refer to as a 3-1-3 pattern. And that 3-1-3 refers to the different declensions. The third declension, the first declension, and the third declension. And that 3-1-3 pattern here will help you to remember that for the most part, when we're dealing with the participles in the active voice, that the pattern follows the third declension in the masculine and the neuter, and the first declension. So this is why when we were dealing with chapter 11, I emphasized to you that it was necessary to learn your third declension endings. And so just as we saw with the third declension nouns, the nominative singular will always have its own unique ending. And so here in the present active participle, the stem will always be, well, here is lu, but the ending will always be omega nu, so it's luon. Notice, though, how it's different from everything else that follows in the column in the masculine singular. From luon, then we go to luontas, luonti, and luonta. And so notice that just as you learned in the third declension, the omicron sigma, the iota, and the alpha were your clues for the genitive, the dative, and the accusative, that has been retained. What we've done here is we've added to the lu stem an omicron nu tau, which will help you to identify that you are dealing with a participle. So going down the masculine singular column, we have luon, luontas, luonti, luonta. Taking a look over at the neuter, also following the third declension, we start off with luon. Instead of omega nu, it's omicron nu. And then look at that. Luontas, luonti, luon. All right. Again, following that third declension. In the middle, then we have, all right, luusa, luuses, luuse, luusan. All right, so this is your present active participle, okay? And this is just the singular. And so what you have is you have a noun, and there are a potential of 12 different endings, folks, just in the present active participle singular, but they all follow the different declensions that you learned from the noun. So it's luon, luusa, luon in the nominative, in the genitive, luontas, luuses, luontas, in the dative, luonti, luuse, luunti, in the accusative, luunta, luusan, and luon. Notice in the feminine, in the genitive, you got your familiar ace that you're already familiar from your to taste to from your definite articles. In your dative, you got your a with your iota subscript, and then in your accusative, you got an alpha nu. All right, whereas you're used to seeing eta nu, but now this is alpha nu. Now we'll talk about how to unpack these as far as parsing and translating in just a moment. Okay, but let's first of all take a look at a plural paradigm of the present active participle. Here, notice that the format is a little bit more consistent. All right, notice in the nominative plural we have our familiar epsilon sigma that we've seen already. Going down the masculine, all right, we have luontes, luonton, luusin, and luontas. Okay. Notice again, we have a masculine, feminine, neuter across the top, nominative, genitive, dative across the side there. In the neuter, luon ta, luon ton, luusin, luon ta. And then in the feminine plural, luusai, luuson, luuses, luusas. These are the present active participles plural paradigm that you will be learning in this class. So, before we actually get into how we're going to translate and how we're going to parse, let's just take a little bit more examination of actually how this works. Participles can show up in an attributive position. Okay? So, with that in mind, remember the attributive position tells us that it's being used as an adjective. That means that the participle will have a definite article in front of it. And the good news is that just as everything must agree in gender, number, and case in every other instance, the same is true here. So let's take a look at a couple of examples of how this is going to work. The first sentence you see on your screen, ha agathos anthropos, the good man. Notice that we have a masculine singular nominative definite article. We have agathos, our adjective, which has the masculine singular nominative ending. And then we have anthropos, which also has the masculine singular nominative ending. Just as with the adjective, in order for us to say the good man, the definite article, the adjective, and the noun must all agree in gender, number, and case. Okay? The same is going to be the case with the participle. Why don't you take a moment and turn to page 153 in your textbook, and you will see the paradigm that I had on the screen for you, and you can follow along with me. I'll wait for you just for a moment while you turn there. Okay, if you're on page 153 now, looking at the paradigm, look at the masculine nominative singular. If you can see it there, you'll see that it's luon, which is the same exact participle we have on our screen here. The second one in the blue, you can see it right here. Okay? It's ha luon anthropos. Now notice that the definite article in front of our participle is a masculine singular nominative. You already know your definite article. The definite articles will never change. They always are the same. But then look and see we've got luon. Okay? And if you look at your paradigm, you'll notice that the ending omega nu, when it attaches itself to a verb, it becomes a participle, and you can see it there under the masculine singular nominative. All right? And so we'll look at parsing it later, but I can tell you right now that this is a present active participle, and here's the important part: masculine singular nominative. Notice that this participle agrees in gender, number, and case with the definite article that precedes it, which is also masculine singular nominative. So with the definite article, we have a masculine singular nominative definite article. In the participle, we have a present active participle, and here's the key: masculine singular nominative. And then with our noun that is following this, we have anthropos, we have masculine singular nominative. And so when I translate this, I would then translate it not simply as the loose man, but the loosing man, or the man who looses. And we'll take a look again how to do that as we move throughout the lesson. The third example you see on the screen is he luusa gune. Taking a look at your paradigm, if you look at the feminine singular nominative, you'll see the luusa ending there. Okay, you can see it's our feminine singular nominative ending. Look at our definite article that begins this example. It's the definite article he, which is our feminine singular nominative. We know then by looking at our participle paradigm on 153 that luusa is our feminine singular nominative, so our participle there is a present active participle, feminine singular nominative, and then gune we know also is a feminine singular nominative noun. So we know therefore that this is a present active participle, feminine singular nominative. All three, that is the definite article, the participle, and noun, agree in gender, number, and case. So I would translate this as the loosing woman, or the woman who looses. Sometimes we can use it as just simply a substantive. We already saw this in previous lessons. We saw how when we have ha agathos that sometimes we do not have to have the word anthropos after it to say the good man, because we know that the definite article is masculine singular nominative, and we know that agathos is also masculine singular nominative. We know that implicitly within that little construction we have the good man or the good one, we could even say. The same can happen with a participle. Notice from the example on the screen that we have ha luan. Okay, and notice that the definite article is the masculine singular nominative, and then the luon, if you look at your paradigm on page 153, you'll see that luon again comes from the masculine singular nominative section. All right, so we have masculine singular nominative definite article, and then we have a present active participle. Masculine singular nominative is our verb there, so it's ha luon is the loosing one, or we could simply say the loosing man, or we could even say the man who looses. The same thing can happen if we take and we do it in the feminine. We already saw how he agathe can mean the good woman or the good one. If we have he luusa, we know that the he is our feminine singular nominative. Looking at our paradigm on 153, we see luusa is a feminine singular nominative ending, so it's a present active participle, feminine singular nominative. Okay, so what we have here is either the loosing one, more generic, or if we want to be specific about the gender, we could say the loosing woman or the woman who looses. And this is an important point for us to pause and point something out. The verbs, whatever verb may be that is actually entering into the paradigm for the participle. When a verb becomes a participle, that verb can either be masculine, feminine, or neuter when it becomes a participle. And so you need to know what your endings are so that you know whether the verb is taking the part of the masculine gender, the feminine gender, or the neuter gender. Here's a little cartoon to help us remember. You'll notice that we have Participle there, and he is on a raft in a tributary to help us remember attributive. And we know that when article, that is our definite article, is before the participle, we know then that the participle is in the attributive position. And you'll notice that between the article and the participle or participle, we have an owl carrying a sandwich, which is to help us to remember that sometimes we'll have to add the word who or which when we translate our sentence. So the one who looses if it was masculine or feminine, or if it was a neuter, we'd say the one which is loosing. Okay, so the who or the which. With that in mind, let's take a look at a few examples here that'll help us to understand how we're going to do our parsing and our translating work. The first example on the screen is ha baptizon anthropos. I know that ha there is a masculine singular nominative definite article. I know that anthropos is a masculine singular nominative noun, and when I look at my paradigm on 153, I recognize that the omega nu ending comes from the masculine singular nominative section of the paradigm, and so I know then that I want to parse this participle as a present active participle masculine singular nominative. Notice how my parsing works here. I have here in the beginning the present. I know what tense it is. Okay, it's present. I then have the voice. It is in the active voice. And then I have a P there that reminds me that I'm not dealing with just any old verb. I'm dealing with a participle. And then I have the three parts that helps me to remember that I'm dealing with its noun of a participle. It's a masculine singular nominative ending right there. So present active participle masculine singular nominative, and I would translate this as the man who baptizes. Okay, the man who baptizes. Let's take a look at another similar example here. Here we have ha baptizon. In this case, we do not have the word anthropos, okay? But notice we can have a very similar translation. Again, ha baptizon, it's the same exact participle construction we have above. And so it's masculine singular nominative definite article. And my participle here, baptizo, with the omega nu on the end, tells me I'm dealing with a participle. So it's a present active participle, masculine singular nominative, the man who baptizes, or I could simply say the one who baptizes. Okay? Let's take a look at it when the participle is not in the nominative case. Here I have blepo tus legantas. Blepo, I know, is a present active participle masculine, present active participle first person singular. It's a regular verb, it's not a participle, so it's simply I see. But then tus legontos, I know that lego comes from Lego, it's a verb, but there's a definite article, tus, on the front. So, and the antas ending is my indication there that this is not a construction I'm used to seeing, so I must be dealing with my participle here. And so here is how I would parse my participle. The participle is a present active participle, masculine plural accusative. Now, one thing here that's going to be very helpful to you, as I've been telling you from the very beginning of this course, that when you know your definite article, it will help you. When I look at tus legantas, looking at that participle, I see that it's lego. I know it's a verb, but the antas ending is not one of any of the other verb tenses. It's not from the present, the imperfect, the future, the aorist, or the perfect. The antas there actually looks like a noun ending, and it preceded by a definite article. So I know that I'm dealing with a participle, and at this point, because you've only learned so much about participles, I know it's a present active participle, and that tus helps me because I know that that is a masculine plural accusative definite article. It helps me right along. So I look at this and I go, present active participle, masculine plural accusative, and with my blepo there, present active indicative first person singular, I know that it's I see, so it's I see the men who speak, or I see the ones who speak. Let's take a look at another example of the same type of participle, this time in the feminine and in the genitive. Here we have tes leguses. The tes is our feminine singular genitive definite article, so we know that that goes there. We look at leguses. Again, lego is a verb, uses, participle ending. Whenever a definite article is on the front of a participle, we then know that we are dealing with a participle. So here in this case, I would parse it as present active participle, feminine singular genitive, and it would be of the woman who speaks, or you could even simply say of the woman speaking would be another way to translate this sentence. Okay. Now, we've just looked at the way that the participles, like the adjective, can appear in the attributive position. And you remember that the opposite of the attributive position is the predicate position. And this is when a participle will appear without a definite article. And when this is the case, the participle will be used as an adverb. All right, and what it will do is it will describe the circumstances related to the main verb. So it'll make it circumstantial action. That means that you will translate the present participle using the word while. Let me give you some English examples. I was frustrated while driving home in the snow. In this sentence, the main verb here is actually the word frustrated. In fact, you could simply say, I was frustrated. But then we have a participle here, the word driving. And that driving helps to set up the circumstances underneath which you were frustrated. It is while driving home in the snow. So here in this first example, it's I was frustrated while driving home in the snow. For example, in the second instance, we have while swimming, I caught a cold. The main verb of the sentence is caught. And we could just simply say, I caught a cold. But by introducing the participle swimming, it sets up the circumstances underneath which we caught the cold. While swimming, I caught the cold. Just as this is how a participle can be used in English, we can see the same thing happening in Greek. In your example that we have there on the screen, we have keruse ha anthropos luon ton doulon. Here your participle is in blue, luon, and you'll notice that keruse is a present active indicative third person singular. You've got ha anthropos, masculine singular nominative noun and definite article. Luon is a present active participle masculine singular nominative. So we know that ha anthropos and luon all agree together. And so in this sentence we have the man, while loosing the slave, preaches. Or you could say, while loosing the slave, the man preaches. Because the definite article is on ha anthropos, but there is no definite article on luon, our participle, that's my clue to translate this as while. Plus, we already have a verb in this sentence, keruse, preaching. We could simply say ha anthropos keruse, the man preaches. But the luon ton doulon, or while loosing the slave, tells us the circumstances underneath which the man was preaching. So keruse ha anthropos luon ton doulon, the man while loosing the slave preaches, or while loosing the slave, the man preaches. We can do the same thing with a feminine participle. In this example, you see he gune blepe ton kurion legusu tauta entu heru. He gune, notice, is a feminine singular nominative construction. Blepe, present active indicative third person singular, and ton kurion is a masculine singular accusative. You could just simply say here in the beginning, the woman sees the Lord. But notice our participle legusa. Okay, and legusa is a feminine singular, a present active participle, feminine singular nominative, and there is no definite article on the front of that participle, so we know it's in the predicate position. It sets up the circumstances underneath which this happens. So the woman sees the Lord while saying these things in the temple, or while speaking these things in the temple, the woman sees the Lord. It's going to take a little bit of skill to get your head around these things, but don't worry. You'll find that after a while you'll be able to adjust. Let's take a look at some practices that we have on page 154 in your book. I've chosen just a few to help you along. Here on your screen we have this construction. He pastuusi eis ton kurion sodzontai. I've parsed out our participle which shows up first. He pastuusai is a present active participle, feminine plural nominative. Again, notice my definite article on the front of the participle helps me figure out half of the problem right there. Because I know that the he is a feminine plural nominative, I know then that the other, when I already know it's a present active participle. And when I look at sodzontai, at the end, that is a present, and I'm going to say that it's passive indicative third person plural. Okay, so the construction of the sentence we have here using our participle and our verb is the women who believes in the women who believe in the Lord are being saved. So notice, a participle does not necessarily mean that there's still not a verb in the sentence. All right, the participle is there to help the action of the verb move along or to describe something. In this case, the participle is working as an adjective. It's telling us something about the women. That is the women who believe. And what about these women who believe? They are being saved by the Lord. Let's take a look at another sentence. Luon ton doulon keruse ha anthropos. Luon is our participle at the front. Notice that it does not have a definite article for it, so we know it's in the predicate position. And I'm going to help you right off the bat by parsing it. It is a present active participle, masculine singular nominative. Okay, looking at our paradigm on 153 helps us to know that. So luon tan duon, while loosing the slave. And then here is our main verb in the sentence, keruse, which is a present active indicative, third person singular. While loosing the slave, he preaches. And who's the he that's doing the preaching? Well, it's the ha-anthropos, or the man, masculine singular nominative. Which again, notice here that the masculine singular nominative of ha-anthropos agrees in gender, number, and case with our participle at the front, our present active participle, masculine singular nominative. So I know that these two go together. And so in this case, it is while loosing the slave, the man preaches. Who's loosing the slave? The man, because I know that because the man is in the masculine singular nominative gender number and case, and the participle is a present active participle, masculine singular nominative. Let's do one more here. Baptizantes tous anthropous ek kairumen. In this case, baptizantes, okay, as you're going to learn in just a moment. I haven't taught this to you yet, but well, I have taught you yes, but it is a present active participle, masculine plural nominative. All right, and there is no definite article in front of it, so it is in the predicate position, so we know that it's circumstantial. So present active participle, masculine plural nominative is while baptizing, tooth anthropous is a masculine plural accusative, while baptizing the men. And then our main verb in this sentence, in this case, comes from Cairo. Notice we have an augment on the end of it, and it is an imperfect active indicative, first person plural. So it is we were rejoicing. So the participle is setting up the circumstances under which we are rejoicing. And so it is while baptizing the man, excuse me, it should be the men, we were rejoicing. Now, on your screen, you're going to notice that there is also a present participle of Amy. These don't really show up a whole lot. Now and then they will. You'll notice that the participle ending just simply shows up on its own in a sentence, and it should be just translated simply as being. At this point, I don't want you to spend too much time worrying about it. What I want you to do, however, is to use this present participle chart of Amy, and you'll find it also on page 155. Use this as a way to help remember your endings to the participle. Notice across the nominative, we got the on, usa, on, and the genitive, antes, uses, untas. In your dative, anti, use, anti, and in your anta, we've got usan and on. In the plural, we have then antes, usai, unta, anton, uson, anton, usin, uses, usin, untas, usas, unta. Don't spend too much time at this point worrying about the Amy version of this, but I do want you to use these paradigms if you find them helpful to learn your participle endings. And unfortunately, as we have learned with everything else that we've dealt with verbs, there are also middle passive endings. The good news here is that the middle passive endings follow a much more familiar pattern. Notice the 2-1-2 pattern over the top. That is to remind you of the 2-1-2 pattern that you're so familiar with. So middle passive participles do not take the third declension. So there are your good old familiar as, a, on. All right, in the nominative, just looking here in the red, in the genitive, u, ace, u, and your dative, o, a, o, and then your accusative, on, ain, on. Notice in the black, you've got your lu stem, and then there is a distinctive part of the middle passive participles. It is the amen, or simply just the men, is really what you need to be looking for in the blue that follows all the way through. And so when you see lu amenas, or lu amenu, or lu ameno, or lu amenan, all in the masculine, that's your clue that you're dealing with a middle passive. Okay, taking a look in the plural of the middle passive, there are the same good old familiar definite article endings that you learned. Oi, I, ah, own, ois, ice, ois, and us, as, ah. Okay, so again, there's your loose stem, and then in the middle is the men between the stem and the familiar 2-1-2 pattern. Luamenoi, luamene, luamena in the nominative, luamenon, luamenon, luamenon in the genitive, luamenois, luamenais, luamenois in the dative, luamenus, luamenas, luamena. Okay? With that in mind, let me give you a few examples to look at with middle passives. And I've already parsed them for you on the screen. Notice we have ha, luminas, doulos, kai, re. In the ha, luminas is our participle. Notice the way I've parsed it. The aminos tells me that it is a middle passive participle. So it's a present middle passive participle, masculine singular nominative. And because it is passive, and I'm just going to go here because it's singular, I'm going to go with just the passive rather than the middle at this point. The slave who is being loosed rejoices. Okay, the slave who is being loosed rejoices. And notice that the participle luminos there has a definite article on the front of it, so it is in the attributive position. In the next sentence, we got diok aminoi upo to andros prasuk amatha. Okay, and diok aminoi here is a present middle passive participle. All right, masculine plural nominative. In this case, it is in the predicate position because it does not have the definite article. So I know that it's circumstantial. So I want to set up here with the word while. All right, prasuk amatha is our present deponent indicative, first person plural. We pray. And so I would translate this sentence, while being persecuted by the man, we pray, or we could say we are praying. Lastly, let's look at the last sentence for an example. Legomin tes paruamenes es ton oikon. Our participle there is tes paruamenes. All right, notice that here it is in the attributive position because it has a definite article on the front of it. It comes from the word paruomai, so I know it's deponent. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, deponent verbs also show up in participles. If you learned a verb as deponent, that is with an omai ending, you need to keep that in mind working with a participle. And so here in this case, we have a present deponent participle, feminine plural dative. Okay. Our legomen is our present active indicative, first person plural. And so here, because it's a feminine participle, we know we could talk about women here. So we say, we speak to the women who are praying in the house. We don't say who are praying for themselves. We don't say who are being prayed because it's a deponent. So everything works the same as it did. It's going to take some time for you to get your head around these endings and the way they work. I expect that. That's why we don't give you any vocabulary. That's why we break up the participle into 3 different sections in Chapter 12. Okay, you're going to have some opportunity here to just work a little bit more slowly through them. For this class, or for this chapter, I want you to memorize the endings as best to your ability of the active and the middle passive voices of the present active, and I want you to complete at least 10 of the Chapter 12 practice exercises in the workbook. And the numbers that you can do in your practice workbook for Chapter 12 are numbers 1, 2, 5, 8, 9, 11, 12, 17, 23, and 25. You see it there on your screen. All right. So Take your time, use the book, make sure you parse out all your participles and do these practice sentences, and we will work our way through this slowly because there are unfortunately a lot of participles in the New Testament. But what you're going to discover, it opens up a whole new world to you for translating